Hello and welcome to Wide Angle. The plot, as they say, is thickening in West Asia. The ceasefire is holding in Gaza, but meanwhile, the American airstrikes have started, in fact, they started a few days ago in northern Iraq. I suppose you can't have airstrikes against two Arab peoples at the same time. So one is silent, the other airstrike has begun. Where is all this going? And we have for our panel today Dr. Awwad. He has been the senior most foreign correspondent in Delhi. He's an Arab journalist. And we have Kanwal Sibal, who has been our foreign secretary and an ambassador in that region, in particularly, let me mention Turkey, where Erdogan has just won, to complicate the whole picture. Now let us begin with the American bombing of the Kurdish half of Iraq. Why just the Kurdish half?
Well, I think this is very interesting to see. Why? Because it is the question in everybody's mind why they are in fact supporting IS in Syria and they are opposing them in Iraq. So the reason mainly now the media is catching is that they are targeting selective target within Iraq. So they are cementing the division of Iraq by keeping the Kurdish area safeguarded, because the United States now even decided to send more troops to that region. Secondly, because the humanitarian crisis created for the Yazidi tribes, with the small minorities who are Kurdish in origin also, have been attacked and subjugated by the ISIS, and along with the Christian minorities, have raised the international outcry about the reality of what is the American and the West is doing, keeping silent. Because if we look at the ISIS now, everybody is opposing the ISIS, everybody is condemning their atrocity. Then who is supporting them? Therefore, they have to come in a very clear pictures really about why they have been selecting those targets and attacking those places. Firstly, to prevent Erbil from falling in the hand of the ISIS, because the Peshmerga till date they have noticed that they are unable to protect the area which have been protected by the West for the last 15 years.
Two questions here. Before we come to you, Kanwal, let him clarify this point. Who are the Yazidis? Very briefly, because there's some confusion that Yazid, who was involved in the killing of Hussein, these people worship him and therefore they are Yazidis. What kind of a tribe is this who has been in
Saeed, you know that the Yazidis are part of the Kurdish groups, where they have taken
it's
the mountain to survive because they were atrocity.
It has nothing to do with the Yazid in the Umayyad, the Shia.
No, Muawiyah bin Yazid, or there was nothing to do with Yazid. Why they have said it? They have nothing to do with it at this stage, but they are very secretive about their own follow-up. But basically,
there are many secretive.
They are Zaradishtis in their follow-up.
The Druze people don't know really too much about the Druze people. There are these secret groups there. This is one such group.
Yeah.
Kanwal, let's get you into it. The situation if you remember 1991, when Operation Desert Storm started, soon after that, the West imposed a no-fly zone in the south, which was not taken very seriously because the Shias were there, and therefore that's all right. But the northern half, where Kirkuk was involved, when you were ambassador in Turkey about that time, and so there the no-fly zone was imposed rather stringently, and at that stage, Erbil was a place where plenty of American officials were resident. Now they have made no bones about the fact that there are plenty of American presence in Erbil. That's one. Secondly, that they want to protect the Shias and the minorities and the Christians. I mean, you can't have the West see Christians fleeing and seeking refuge, and the Western audiences not react to that. I believe that would be one reason. They are not talking about it exactly for that reason. But that is one consideration. And now let us have your analysis. What do you think is happening? Why have the Americans come in to attack the Kurdish half?
Well, I think the impression that many of us have, that big country like the United States with global responsibilities and with so much resources at their disposal, intellectual, communications, capacity to analyze, think through, have all these agencies, debates, discussions with think tanks thrown in, that they will be knowing exactly what they do. But if you see the end result of American policies, especially in this region, one has to question very seriously whether they are capable of thinking responsibility and even acting responsibility, and whether they have solutions to the problems that they create in the name of finding solutions to some other problems.
Yes.
So what is happening is actually this, that they destroyed Iraq, and they thought that they had destroyed Germany and Japan, but both became democracies, and it'll be a similar kind of a thing to bring democracy to Iraq. It was foolish on their part, but this is what had happened on the ground. Is they've broken up the country, they've broken the social system, they've caused huge misery, and then they were not able to control the situation thereafter, because they couldn't reach an agreement about leaving troops behind, because they needed some special diplomatic protection for them, which Maliki was not willing to give them, and he didn't want to have some kind of a permanent American presence in the country, which will not be covered by domestic laws. So the Americans withdrew, thinking they had left behind a reasonably strong army, which would be able to cope with any challenge that might occur. Even that has proved wrong. Then they started destroying Syria. And the result has been that all these radical elements which they were supporting in Syria to oust Assad have combined with the consequence with people who have suffered from the sectarian policies of Maliki, and they have been able to carve out space for themselves in northern Iraq and in adjoining parts of Syria, motivated by this highly radical ideology, which some people may find inspirational, of an Islamic caliphate. And since Baghdad, nevertheless, and the southern part is well protected relatively, and the Shias will fight very strongly there. The weaker part is the Kurdish part, and I think the Peshmergas, who thought that they could cope with any threat from these forces, it appears that they are unable to do so, and the Americans have been left with no choice but to intervene and very reluctantly resume their airstrikes. And Obama now has said he can't say how long these strikes will continue. They want to protect. They want to protect the autonomy of Iraq, of northern Iraq, of the Kurdish areas. They want to control these areas because of the oil wealth of these areas, and there is this Israeli connection that we know, but also of the oil companies and other U.S. interests who are able to get access to cheap oil, which can be sold in the market for $100, $110 a barrel. So there's a lot of money at play there. And then, of course, there is this, what was rightly said by him about the Christians and the Yazidis and others who are being targeted by the Islamic Caliphate, and it's become a humanitarian issue. But this sympathy and this concern about the Christians and the way they are being traumatized now seems to me to be a bit false, because it's not as if they did not know that the end result of all this and the rise of radicalism would result in this. And in Syria, precisely this, after all, Syria was a secular state. There are Christians there too. But they are not bothered very much about the effect of their policies on local societies and destroying the fabric of these societies, which include people belonging to various religions. So even this,
as you very rightly say, and now that you're talking about the Christians in that area, and we can almost be biblical and say, well, these people, the Americans and the West, they know not what they do, and they're the consequences thereof. In fact, they don't know. The question here again is, two things have happened at the same time here. One is that Nur al-Maliki, the Prime Minister, who in fact has been sort of losing control over the wider coalition. First, the Sunni Vice President, if you remember, he ran away and he took Turkey and wherever. So there was a Sunni alienation. And then Hoshiar Zubairi, who was so close to the Americans in Kurdistan that they, in fact, he was their man in the Iraqi Foreign Office, Hoshiar Zubairi. Now recently he has been thrown out by Maliki. Now, so Maliki is isolation, and the Kurds now being a little more noisy, and they lobbying with the Americans. Do you see that happening?
I think there is a tremendous pressure on Maliki to resign. A, because he sided with the Syrian government and he is always known as the pro-Iranian, and the whole game plan in the Middle East is really to isolate and break up this kind of aggressions, which takes the Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon and Hamas all together in one line. So the whole aim or objective is to break it up. So now, according to the latest news which we have from Baghdad, it's been cemented that the army is on high alert, and the Maliki is adamant, he's refusing to step down because he said, I can stand for the for consecutive third terms, because he is having the largest majority group within the parliament. And even the High Court of Iraq yesterday said that yes, he is eligible to be nominated. He had a rift with the new president who has been elected, that he has not been invited by him. Therefore, because the Baathists, the Sunni groups, Hoshiar and his group also pulling out because they don't want him to stay. If he stay in power, then the provocation will continue, which is going to happen, of course, because they wanted to really create a kind of a rift within the coalition in Iraq that they can fight among each other. That's the whole aim of the plan. And even if you link it to the Kurdish area, the attack basically by the American on selected target also fall in the strategic thinking of the United States is that the Bloomberg on that the people of that region will have retaliation more against the minority to cause more expulsion. So ethnic cleansing will be more prominent in the coming days if this kind of instability and hangover of the government of Iraq is not being called off. Because if they don't form the government now, the situation will be deteriorating more and more. But and the ground also forces, we are seeing that the Iraqi forces joined hand with the Kurdish in attacking ISIS in certain area within Iraq, and that has been using the Air Force on
Awwad, that. I shall come to that, because let's complete this part of the story. Maliki is at the moment Kanwal quite isolated. Ayatollah Sistani, who everyone respects in the Shia, and in fact beyond the Shia, he has that wider respect he has earned. He says, even he has said that Maliki should in fact make way for a more inclusive, all-inclusive group. Even the Iranians, there have been news, even they are. We were talking about Nur al-Maliki and the fact that he in fact is now on his way out. Another aspect, Kanwal, is that how did this ISIS, Islamic State, become so muscular overnight? How did it have so much equipment, so much military training? Where have they been trained? And there are all sorts of conspiracy theories can be concocted. But let us get down to a more practical one. I have a strange feeling that the Baathists were not altogether, they were not in power, but they had been put on the margins. It is the old Baathist groups who, to fix Maliki, have joined hands with this lot, and therefore that becomes another kind of a fear. Is Baathist going to reassert himself in that area? That should worry the Americans. I don't know whether they have taken that into account. Likewise, the Baathists in Syria. I mean, in Syria, the Baath party must have been shaken by the events, and it is these elements, those who have moved over to the opposition, who they have linked up. And now this muscular and extremely well-trained group that is moving is not just Islamic Mahdi's. These are well-trained, well-considered, militarily trained people. Observation.
Well, you know, I've been asking myself that the Americans spend so much of their political and financial capital in Iraq.
10 years.
Yes. and that they have left behind a sufficient number of people, both in the Baghdad area and in the north. Surely they have not turned their back so fully on Iraq that they were not following the situation on the ground. They must have analyzed also what the intervention in Syria meant and the support for all these radical groups. Now, it would appear that either, of course, it has been engineered and you can have a conspiracy theory, or that they have been caught by surprise, that they had not followed developments on the ground sufficiently closely to be able to anticipate what turn the situation could take. For example, it appears that these guys, the Islamic Caliphate fellows, didn't actually have to fight very much,
yes,
because the Iraqi army collapsed in the west.
The collapse of the Iraqi army is what I'm questioning.
Yeah, northwest. Why did they collapse? Some people reason that actually many of them are Baathist elements who have been progressively alienated because of Maliki's policies, and therefore they have had sympathy for these fellows who emerged from the scene and simply handed over their weapons and vanished. And then these fellows took over the treasury and they now got a lot of money to dole around, etc., etc. So this is the surprising part. And then, of course, there are people who say that, towards the end of his own regime, President Saddam Hussein had also started using Islamic vocabulary, and
he put Allahu Akbar on his flag only after Operation Desert
so therefore the Baathist party was also infected, if you like, by this kind of Islamized thinking.
Like tactic. Islam as tactic.
So therefore, when these guys emerged from the scene in the name of Islam in the way they did, they already were therefore the Baathist, watered down Baathist ideology of these forces actually had something, or they could find something appealing in what these fellows were trying to do, coupled, of course, with all their problems with Maliki and his policies and the sectarian situation in Iraq. So I think the success of this army is on account of various factors, but it's not as if, to my mind, I may be ill-informed, that they are very strong on the ground and they have the ability to fight. The second thing which I find very pertinent in this case is, as in the case of these guerrilla fighters, the Taliban and all that, they don't hold ground, they don't hold cities, this and that, because they can become vulnerable to armed action, to airstrikes and this and that. But here they are occupying a sufficiently large area, and it's known what area they are occupying. And for the Americans to say that it's going to be a long haul, there can't be an easy military solution, and that these airstrikes will continue indefinitely, it raises some questions in my mind as to why they're saying this, and how is it that if they really intend to, and if they feel that this budding Islamic Caliphate should be nipped in the bud, that they are trying to create an impression as if combating them on the ground will not be a desirable thing, and that will be a long haul.
Are the Americans there for the Islamic Caliphate, or the Islamic Caliphate is the excuse for them to be there? Don't forget, very serious action is on hold in Gaza. It was all over the media, it was all over the social networks. This is the first time that the media war appears to have been lost by Israel, which so far it has never done. And now they're discussing peace in Cairo. They're talking some kind of, that is the, and therefore it gives the Israelis some heart, I suppose, that look, the big brother is here in the neighborhood, he's settling with in Iraq. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it makes lots of sense, because there are strategy, as I said. There are short vision and long vision. Short vision is that they are winning the war, but they are losing peace in the region. Because the selective target we said about it, this is just simply to flare up the situation in the area. B, this ISIS were let us all agree on one thing, that prior to 2003, there was no ISIS, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We all know this. Now, when the American came, the story is different. We understand that, the game plan. They were trained in Jordan, they were trained in Turkey, they were smuggled, funded by Saudi and Qatar, smuggled into Syria. 850 kilometers were opened the border with Turkey, and in Lebanon also, Jundul Islam. All these groups were ready to move and infiltrate. According to American sources, 250,000 jihadists came to Syria from all over the world, which is already, they said, 100,000 left, and 80,000 died, and the rest went to Iraq. This is one. The second part of the problem is that they wanted to kill the resistance. What the American is doing now is an eyewash. The rest of the world knows what is happening to the minority Palestinian in Gaza, why they are not moving in. So therefore, destroying Hamas, submission of the Palestinian, either you submit to our peace or you will be expelled.
You will have to explain that with greater clarity. You were saying, the theory that you just now spelled out is a little complex. Let's get back to simpler things that can be simply communicated to the viewers. At this particular juncture, where are the Saudis in all of this? Now let me tell you why I'm asking you this question. The Saudis are very worried this time over the Israeli action in Gaza, because the Jordanians and the Saudis and the Israelis and the Egyptians were all together. And now they must be having some negative returns because of the media playing that story up. That's one. The second question, Awwad, is where does the Saudis stand vis-a-vis ISIS? Because on the one hand, this has come because of the radical elements that they injected into Syria and others. On the other, I find that they have charged off to Beirut, put $1 billion in Saad Hariri's hand, and say, please keep them in Arsal. Arsal is this enclave near Syria where the ISIS has moved in. So where are the Saudis in both these games?
The Saudis are already in the game. They are in the game of promoting radicalism and extremism in the region and promoting their Wahhabism. And that is why, remember me and read my lips on this, because next time you bring me in this program, you will realize that the people of Iraq themselves who supported ISIS to come are the one who will reject them. The same fashion that happened in Syria, because when they came to Syria, why a Syrian regime government could stand for 3.5 years onslaught, and yet the people of Syria and the army supporting the government, because this kind of extremism, atrocity, killing, slaughtering, this is dangerous.
This is your turn now. You take over and conclude this debate.
What's the question?
The question is that what is this lineup of the Jordanians, the Saudis, Egyptians, Israelis? And they, in fact, Netanyahu even talked of an alliance.
Yes.
He said, let's have a grand alliance of these conservative regimes with. He got Morocco into it also.
See, as I understand, Saudi Arabia has two conflicting objectives. One is that somehow Iran has to be countered. And any policy on the ground which can further that objective should be pursued, because that's the larger danger. In the process, they have been supporting the Islamic Caliphate and this ISIS and whatever. Though when they declared themselves as the Islamic Caliphate, it was a direct challenge to Saudi Arabia as the custodian of the two holy mosques. You can't have the Caliphate unless you control Makkah and Medina. But they are overlooking this because of the larger need that they have of mobilizing these forces, the Sunni forces, the extremist Wahhabi type of forces against this Shia crescent. And a sense of vulnerability that around them in their own oil-bearing territories in Bahrain and even in Kuwait, the Shia are the majority.
Shia thing, apparently, sorry, you concluded.
So therefore, just like everybody else, the Saudis are also caught in a bind, where they have to manage contradictory interests, and both, in a sense, are in conformity with their wider vision of Saudi Arabia being the head.
I have a feeling they don't have, like the Americans, even they have lost the plot. They don't know what they're doing, because in addition to this, the Shia crescent, I think is being overdrawn. The fact of the matter is they are much more worried about the Muslim Brotherhood. Don't forget, they bankrolled Sisi to become president and remove with $8–10 billion and remove Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, there's a continuity there. Muslim Brotherhood is anathema to Jordan. It is anathema to all these monarchies. Somehow, except Qatar is holding on because of the ancient antipathy, the old tradition.
Turkey too, sympathy to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Turkey, very much so.
But the winning of Erdogan will flare up the situation more now, because Turkey and Qatar together, and American and the Saudis, as you said, moderate with the Israelis on the other hand. So as Ambassador Kanwal said, it is going to increase the rift between Sunni Shia sectarian violence, because Iran, at the other hand, is a checkmate, and that's the fact.
In fact, what is going on at this point in time, Kamal, is there so many divisions being created, the Yazidis and the Christians and the Sunnis and the Shias and the whole lot. In all of this plot, now the time has come to an end. There is one silver lining. When the Christians were seen in various churches, moving from one church to the other, seeking refuge, and the American media played it up extensively, do you know something very interesting happened? A call came from Najaf and Karbala. They said, look, the Christian brothers, they don't have to fear. Our brothers and sisters, come, we are here to protect you. So the doors, they opened the doors. Now that is one silver lining that I have seen in this whole episode, which has happened yesterday. I read in one of the Beirut newspapers. So other than that, well, the story, this is a running story. At the moment, we have only dwelt on the American airstrikes on Iraq. We have not yet touched on Erdogan's victory in Turkey, and we have not touched on the ceasefire and the peace process that is being kick-started in Cairo. On that note, promising you to come back again on these themes and more, goodbye.